Why digitalization? That's kind of the direction that we discussed as a relevant topic for the audience. And let me start with a little bit of history. Harvard just completed a study not too long ago, and they indicated that the majority of corporate or company energy users have no idea what's going on with their energy. It's interesting that the same study concluded that they probably assume they waste over 30% of the energy consumed. So it's a little bit interesting that they don't know what they're doing with energy, but they're pretty sure they're wasting at least 30% of that energy in the process. And a little bit of examination on why that phenomenon was out there, and it really boiled down to two things, actually three. One, we don't know where our energy is flowing, so a lack of information. Two, we don't understand the energy market that we participate in and what our options are. And then three, an interesting conclusion was that we're not sure who owns the responsibility for that management of energy. And so we've looked at this. We'll just have some data flowing behind me throughout the discussion here. But we've looked at it, and it was interesting that in a recent poll that we surveyed over 150 utilities, we found that almost 50%, 48 to be exact, indicated that they expect to have to become a digital company, a digital business to be successful in the next whatever outlook. And the outlooks varied from immediate to long term, but almost 50% had recognized they need to have that digital capability as an organization. Same group of people indicated that 30%, interesting combination with the Harvard study, but less than 30% of the respondents indicated that they had the ability to move information across their organization. Now, this isn't a consumer, this is a utility in the response that's looking at the complexity of making information, and a huge relevant data point, not making data available, but making information available across the organization. So if you look at those combinations, we see more and more reference to that digitalization, that drive to move forward. Digitalization is going to be accomplished 3, 4 different components. One is the devices need to produce the data in a digital model. And I would say, well, if you were in the last panel discussion, we've got the technology, they exist. Question of whether we can afford to invest in them or not and how prevalent they are, that's a different question. But certainly we're not waiting for digitalization to be available to us. The second is we need the networks, the communication, because that digitalization left in the spot that it's generated doesn't do much value for anybody. So that combination of communication of digital information, digital data, if you will, is the second key point. Third is, what do you do with it once it's communicated? And I think that's where we sit as an industry today in that path to digitalization, is what do we do with the data? I find very few customers that I deal with, both industrial or utility, that say, I don't have data. I see all kinds of them that say, we don't know what to do with it, we might not even be sure where it exists. So what that collection of data does once it's moved, communicated to, consolidated, it's the analytics related to that data, and that's, I would argue, the cusp that we're looking at for the next generation. Following the collection, the analytics, the determination of what that data is telling us, i.e. turning it into information, is what do we do about it? And I think digitalization is not just an IT back office function, but what does the OT side, the operations, start to do with the results of digitalization? And that's arguably our biggest challenge facing us today. You can see just some of the information that's flowing back and forth on the screen. The expansion of smart devices, intelligent devices, machines, you name it, is growing rapidly. An average utility with smart meters, full SCADA system, is generating in excess of 10 terabytes of data a year. And that's just the simple use of data that we apply today. Where we go in expanding that 10 terabytes to, at a utility level, a very vertical perspective, starting to spread it horizontally is the key opportunity as we embrace, I guess is the word I'm looking for, that machine-to-machine capability. If you look at the market that we're playing in right now, it's got a huge amount of history. We have a huge amount of reliance, confidence, and trust in how we've managed this system, this most complex machine on the planet, so to speak. And it's been through the law of averages. It's been through a consistent, we know where things are going. We know what we can control. We manage the ups and downs, try to manage and level the peak, level the valleys, and operate a consistent system. It works. It has worked. Have we ever measured the efficiency of how it works? Whether you look at spinning reserves, whether you look at the flexibility of the consumer to do what they want, when they want, at no consequence. Prior panel, we talked a lot about what are the impetus to engage the consumer. And we've seen a big change in consumer engagement due to environmental, without a doubt. We've seen it become an engagement through sustainability and reliability. But I would argue, not disrespectfully, but argue that the biggest engagement that we see as a society in a problem such as this is price. There's an economic cost and benefit related to what we do with energy. And how we approach that economic cost and benefit is going to motivate us to a result, an action, a willingness to see a change. But if everything's constant, if my energy consumption is a footnote in my economics, where does it put me in the priority of managing it? And arguably, that priority is well down the list. Average US utility bill of, you can argue, $85 to $100. You're getting close to matching, what we're spending on a daily basis through the Starbucks drive-thru. It's not the priority that we're looking at. Where does it become a priority? Arguably, that's with all the dynamics of the market that are being presented today. Distributed energy, in my view, is going to be one of the key impetus to changing what we do. Whether that's changed through opportunity or whether that's changed through necessity, I think is still to be debated. Right now, distributed energy, very opportunistic. I want to be green, I'll go to PV. I want to be economic, I'll go to reduction. I want to be sustainable. A variety of drivers, but each one of them are driving a different behavior in the system. The reliability of the grid that we've so long counted on coming from grid operators is being disrupted through the distributed energy injection. How the utility continues to not only operate the grid, but pay for the grid, if that's the model that we propose moving forward, is at risk from a distributed energy perspective. Every time we introduce a new level of distributed energy, whether it be Solar City and a PV model, whether it be, we had a discussion over Walmart and their ability just as an organization to compile their energy management into not only their own model, but their own information flow. It's a huge disruption potentially to the grid. So as distributed energy comes into play more and more, we need to look at how all of this data starts to come together in a digitalization, and arguably the machine-to-machine. Because not only is the machine-to-machine from a timing perspective more optimal, equally the machine-to-machine is going to give us that efficiency and capability that all the new variables are starting to challenge us with. What we're looking at as we pull together this volume of digitalization, this data, how do we make it relevant? And so it's not only the digitalization, but the speed and the model in which it can be presented. This has got to move arguably the most real-time generation or production to consumption product on the globe we've got to move the management of it to an equal real-time basis. And that creates a whole new challenge that is backed not only by the data flows, but also the decision-making that can occur. And as we move forward, we're looking at a model that combines a distributed or edge-based intelligence to allow that autonomy of operation, the speed of capability, the independence, if you will, back to, pick your terms, a central state and enterprise, but that reliability of that back-end grid that has to be there when everything else fails is going to come to us most efficiently and economically through that enterprise coordination of all the distributed activity. I know, well, as much as I like independence, I like to make my own choice, the last thing I want to do is be a 24/7, 365-day a year manager of my back office grid. I think I've got better things to do. I'm pretty sure that somebody can do it better than I can, but how do we allow me as a consumer to participate in this model that has the monopoly, the history, and arguably the consistency of the utility? I believe digitalization is going to be a part of that. What we know today is only a snippet of where we need to go tomorrow. So combining with that digitalization is a certain amount of agility. And while we're very good at creating agile responses to unexpected events, when you're talking about digitalization, it comes with that level of investment that nobody likes to be wrong about. We're investing in the next level of capability. We want to know what it's going to do. We want to be assured of the outcomes. We want to return our investment to our customers and our investor communities. That is not directly aligned with some of the challenges we're faced with the next level of grid digitalization. So that combination of investment that needs to involve the core utility, the distributed or arguably the new asset owner operator that's going to come into the mix, and the consumer is all needing to come together into an agile model that can maintain today's investment and value creation and turn it into tomorrow's need and opportunity without reinvesting, stopping the cycle, backing up, starting over. So as we've approached this, Siemens overall, we're looking at digitalization as a core, that machine-to-machine capability, but also the integration of the consumer, the customer, into that model. These are all the challenges we're putting together. It's what's exciting to be part of this industry. I've been in the industry for about 20 years, had the opportunity to stand in front of numerous education and university academic audiences. The level of interest in what we're seeing in today's student, tomorrow's industry participant is astronomical at this point. We're starting to instill the fact that this industry is relevant, this industry is critical, but not from an infrastructure-based set and forget, but from an active move us to the next generation. So all that combined is, I think, where we're going to be talking about, whether it's 5 years, 10 years from now. As I said in the earlier panel, I become a little bit of a skeptic in my time frame perspective, but definitely we're going to see a different engagement. I will believe it's either going to be enabled or required to present a digitalization capability in a machine-to-machine model going forward. I'm excited to be a part of it. Hopefully you're excited to participate with it as well. And to the extent that we can form it rather than respond to it, I think will be our biggest benefit going forward. So thanks for the time. I appreciate the interest. Look forward to talking to you after the session.
So I want to bring Mike back on because I had a couple of questions. And one of the things I really liked, Mike, was that you really brought to heart, I don't think anyone's really put this diagram out for me, but analytics, digitalization, and distributed energy resources. Now, I see California, I see New York, I see Texas, Illinois, all these places, Hawaii. All three of those are playing such huge parts. Is analytics the future of DER? Is DER the future of digitalization? Like, all of them seem to feed into one another inevitably.
So what do you start first? Why?
I'm not sure I'm going to give you an answer.
Yeah, maybe not.
You're a chicken and egg, cart before the horse. Where do we want to start? And I think the positive right now is that there are so many different approaches to it.
Yeah.
We're starting from multiple directions, which is good. On the downside,
in
different places, different viewpoints, different perspectives. The challenge is, how do we allow all that innovation to continue to gain momentum instead of drawing us back and saying, wait a minute, too much risk, we need to do X before Y.
Okay.
And so the disaggregators, like I said, I'm still a utility guy at core. I don't want to manage my grid. I want the utility to do that. I'm glad to pay them for it. How do we bring, whether it's policy, whether it's support, whether it's economics, bring an active engagement between each of the participants that are coming at this from multiple angles?
So it's interesting. So one of the other things that we've seen is that we have some really dynamic utilities that are smaller that have come here. Kit Carson Cooperative out of New Mexico has been really mind-blowing. Burbank Power and Light does some of the most innovative stuff in California. So it's interesting. So how do you help a really small utility when a Siemens works with eons and all these enormous giants? What's the difference in sort of the experience and the culture of working with these smaller utilities vis-a-vis the bigger ones? Another one, New Brunswick Power.
Yeah.
What an interesting story.
Absolutely. 500,000 customers, transforming a model, overnight.
The full business model over 3 or 4 years, just incredible.
Yeah, and you could argue that, each one of the players, the small utility, the muni, the co-op, the IOU, the independents, all of them are bringing a different dynamic.
They are.
Positive and negative.
Yeah.
So combining the multiple different approaches, we look at the smaller utilities as being the more agile. And you're seeing what's coming up from the community and the community's impact on a municipal utility and where their strategy goes versus the community impact on an IOU, a 5 million or a multi-state. We're seeing big differences in. And two, I think it was Gordon that mentioned, the economics of what we're proposing, we need the consumer, we need the market to understand that.
Yeah.
You're seeing a better alignment sometimes in understanding that in the small community rather than the large.
The New Brunswick Power just reminded me, there was this Beat the Peak competition among the mayors.
Absolutely.
And so all of a sudden, what an amazing way to change the attitudes. You need to change attitudes before you change behavior, psychographic research tells us. And so some of this is actually cultural too, not only within the utility, but within the community that feels empowered by all of this new actionable information and insight.
Absolutely.
So again, is it DER that drives the analytics, or is it I see different ways of looking at where you piece these parts together.
I was having a discussion over breakfast with somebody, and we talked about, it's not an engineer, it's not an economist, it's a psychologist that needs to be putting these things together sometimes.
We had him, Mike Leggett, the
Absolutely.
first day, that's right.
And what are the human behaviors that are factoring into it? And I think there's two things to look at. We either take a slow, progressive change that is coming at Siemens. We have a program right now with kindergarten, first, and second graders.
Okay.
And I'll admit, when I was introduced to it and asked to come and speak to kindergarten, first, and second graders about energy, it was, what am I going to talk to these guys about energy? Tough audience, at least from my perspective. It's amazing what you're seeing these kids start to understand the connection of energy that I can acknowledge as a kid, as an adult. I'm not sure I saw it.
Right.
So that recognition of that slow, progressive change, you're seeing it being rooted in society. So that's one piece of it.
Yeah.
The other, honestly, I think is we are a very resilient society. We're a very responsive society to when change is required. Right now, we're sitting in an environment where we're not sure if energy change at the micro level is required. We agree that there's an environmental component. We agree there's sustainability. We agree when a natural disaster happens, we don't want the outcomes of Lower Manhattan being out of power, much less the communities for days and weeks at a time. But it's when that actual resiliency is put to test with crisis that we can be responsive. Now, I'm not advocating that we want to see a crisis in order to change the energy model, but at the same time, I think you'll see a combination of continuous change at the grassroots level, at the generational change. My kids are looking at energy much different than, my generation did, and I think even before them. But you're going to combine those in a combination, and to your initial question, where do we start? It's going to be a combination of proactive planning and reactive response.
I appreciate that. Looking at transforming the chaos, it sounds like there's a lot of bridging of that technical, cultural, and generational chasm that is in store. But we do that through different tools now. And so
different tools, different methods, different results, all together give us, something that's been around for a long time. It can't be changed overnight.
Mike, thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mike Carlson, Siemens, thank you so much.